Hopefully everyone can see the screen here, and I will go ahead and start off. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the 2025 NTD reporting for tribes and urban small systems agencies. My name is Lee Lumsden and I am joined by Reed. If you have any questions as we go through our presentation, please feel free to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. As a disclaimer, the contents of this presentation are intended to provide clarity regarding the existing requirements of the FTA and NTD. Please, as always, feel free to refer to the statutes and regulations for requirements. The goal of this webinar is to identify changes for the upcoming report year and to provide an overview of NTD reporting requirements and how to apply those requirements to the system. Again, this presentation has been created for specifically Indian tribes and urban small system reporters. Here is the agenda for this afternoon. First, I will do a quick overview of the NTD, then move on to important changes and clarifications for the 2025 report year. Next, we will review the fundamentals of NTD reporting, and we will discuss how to get started in the NTD reporting system. Then Reed will take over and discuss how to complete the annual report, including some common reporting challenges. And then lastly, we will review the validation and closeout process. This slide identifies the contact information you should use when you are unable to contact your assigned analyst or when you are having technical issues with the reporting system. The NTD reporting application support help desk is available from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. This help desk should be used as a resource to help with questions regarding requests across all FTA-specific applications and systems, such as login issues, system errors and bugs, or performance issues within the system. The non-technical NTD program support services are staffed by an NTD analyst Monday through Friday between the hours of 8 a.m. and 7 p.m. Eastern Time. You should contact this help desk if you have any questions or need clarification regarding any NTD policy or reporting requirements. Please note you should only use this help desk when you are unable to reach your assigned validation analyst. So once again, my name is Lee Lumsden and Reed will be my name is Lee Lumsden and Reed will be presenting the second half of this webinar. If you can find our contact information listed here. Please reach out to us if you have any questions about this presentation, or you can reach out to your analyst directly. This slide identifies FTA's program contact, Chelsea Champlin, who is the NTD program manager for the Office of Budget and Policy. And then this slide identifies the key reference documents for NTD reporting. They are located mostly here. This will include the policy manual, of which an updated copy for the report year 2025 is currently available, the glossary, user guide, and the transit asset management guidebooks. So now that we have completed the housekeeping items, we're going to now move into a quick overview of the National Transit Database. What is the National Transit Database, or NTD? NTD was established to be the nation's primary source for information and statistics on all public transit modes in the United States. It's a source of data for performance measurement, benchmarking, as well as research. So who reports to the NTD? Recipients and subrecipients of Chapter 53 funds report to NTD. Reporters may include those that have received funding in the past and are still required to report based on continuing grant requirements, as well as some who report voluntarily and wish to receive Chapter 5311 apportionment funds in the future. 5311 recipients and subrecipients are required to report due to their grant requirements, as stated here from the associated legislation. NTD data is due on the following dates: October 31st, January 31st, and April 30th. These are assigned depending on your agency's reported fiscal year end date. Please note the last date to submit report revisions for your reporting group. After this date, your report will not be sent back for further revision. We will now go into the changes and clarifications for report year 2025 that may affect your report. First, we have the General Transit Feed Specification, or GTFS, shapes requirement. Beginning in report year 2026, all reduced rural and tribal reporters will be required to submit a shapes text file in their GTFS feed for any fixed route modes. The GTFS shapes.txt file will includes details on the path that your vehicles are traveling on their route and how the transit stops fit together in a route or a trip. Submitting the shapes text file with your GTFS feed will allow users to visualize routes and trips if they map your GTFS feed. Next, for GTFS, all agencies submitting a feed for their fixed route modes will now need to include a value for the agency ID field on the P50 form. The agency ID is a field in the GTFS spec in the agency fare attributes and routes text files. For some, you may already have an agency ID established if you're part of a regional feed or combined feed with other providers. You will report the value in the agency ID field on the P50 form if that is the case. For those that do not have a set agency ID, you should use any value that uniquely identifies your agency. This could be a value such as your NTD ID or your doing business as information. Here you can see the agency ID field that will be required in the NTD reporting system when updating or adding your GTFS feeds. For assistance with GTFS, development, maintenance, or other questions, we encourage you to contact National RTAP. The team at RTAP supports all transit agencies, both rural and urban, and can help build a feed, assist with shapes, files, or answer questions on GTFS best practices. If you need any help, you can attend RTAP's live support meetings on Thursdays between 1 and 1:30 Eastern Time. But we can also help you set up a meeting with RTAP. Let your analyst know if that's something that you would be interested in. So beginning in report year 2025, all agencies reporting to the NTD will now report whether they are a voluntary reporter on the B10 identification form. If you receive or benefit from 5307 or 5311 funding, you will select no. This includes agencies that have continuing grant requirements through those programs. Other agencies required to report to the NTD due to transit asset management requirements will select no as well. Now we move on to the reporting system updates. First, we will cover the consolidation of the A10 stations and maintenance facilities form with the A15 transit asset management facilities inventory form. In report year 2025, the A10 form will no longer be available. The information previously captured via the A10 form will be integrated into the A15 form. And the goal of this consolidation was to simplify facilities reporting and avoid duplication between multiple forms in the NTD. The A15 will now include new fields on the facility level for maintenance facilities and passenger stations to capture the information previously reported on the A10 forms. In order to do this, agencies will now need to indicate the mode and type of service for each facility. By reporting the type of service, this will inform the appropriate data selections for the new fields capturing ownership type. In order to do this, we recommend using the import-export functionality, especially if you have many facilities. So previously, maintenance facilities were only reportable if an agency had some level of capital responsibility and the facility was used more than incidentally for transit service. Beginning in report year 2025, in order to capture leased facilities, agencies must report all maintenance facilities on the A15, regardless of capital responsibility. The incidental use criteria still applies, meaning if the facility is incidentally used, it is not reportable. And there are no changes to which administrative facilities are reportable. For maintenance facilities, agencies will now report information on the maintenance facility type and capacity, and right of use or ownership type, which includes leased or owned, and based on the mode and type of service, who leases or owns the facility. So here's what the maintenance facility type and capacity selections will look like on the A15 form. These options mirror the categories previously available on the A10 form. We will have general maintenance facilities, which are less than 200 vehicles, general maintenance facilities between 200 and 300 vehicles, and general maintenance facilities greater than 300 vehicles, and then heavy maintenance facilities. So next you will select the right of use, either owned or leased. Based on your selection, you will then complete the owned or leased by or leased from options. These are specific to the mode and type of service listed for the facility. For any directly operated modes, the owned or leased by option will default to public agency. And for purchase transportation modes, you will see the service provider option open for selection. For passenger stations on the A15 form, we will now collect the data for ADA accessibility, elevators, and escalators to preserve this information previously collected on the A10 form. On the facility entries for passenger stations, you will see a radio button to indicate if a facility is ADA accessible or not. Then you will have two data fields to enter the number of elevators or escalators in the facility if applicable. For elevators and escalators, do not report any used solely for staff or freight and exclude moving sidewalks. For ADA accessibility, select yes for any facilities that comply with Regulation 49 FR Part 37 and no for any that do not. Please see the reference link here for the regulation outlining ADA accessibility requirements. So that concludes the report year 2025 clarifications and updates. Next, we will move on to a review of the NTD reporting fundamentals. The service data reported to the NTD must be public transportation, but what does that mean? Public transportation means open to the public, and open to the public means that the service is open to the general public except for segments as defined as age, disability, or low income. The service must also be shared ride, as in there must be an attempt to share the vehicle with other passengers. As mentioned here, neither the rider nor the driver may deny use of empty seats to another rider. After determining if you can report the data, the mode level comes next. These two modes are the most common modes reported by rural reporters, demand response or DR, and motor bus or MB. Bus service is defined as a vehicle powered by a motor and containing fuel within. It can include services that have route deviation, point deviation, or deviated fixed route. Demand response service is defined as service scheduled in response to calls from passengers, such as a dial-a-ride. These modes will be updated on the profile's P20 form. Another popular mode is the commuter bus mode. To clarify, commuter bus operates with more than 5 miles of closed door service, and the same type of vehicles are consistently operated on the service. If you think you have both bus and commuter bus service, please keep in mind that a vehicle shouldn't be used between the modes on the same day. This also applies to the driver's work assignments, which are typically separate. If you are currently reporting both commuter bus and bus service and you believe you may only need to report one mode, please contact your analyst for assistance and they can help determine how it should be reported and provide steps on how to change this in the reporting system if appropriate. The next topic we'll cover is types of service. Currently in the NTD, there are two main types of service, directly operated or DO and purchase transportation or PT. Directly operated is when the service is operated by the agency and uses the agency's employees. Purchase transportation is when the vehicles are operated by the seller's employees. The service is branded as the buyer's and the buyer is paying the full cost of the service. Within the purchase transportation category, there are three types. TX is for services operated by a taxi provider, and TN for services operated by a transportation network company or TNC. If the service is operated by a contractor that is neither a taxi provider nor a TNC, the type of service would remain as PT or remain as purchase transportation. After the mode and type of service is determined, the next question is what data should you be collecting for these services? Here are some of the data points as well as the abbreviations that are used throughout this presentation and on the report. These data points are collected on a per mode and type of service basis, except for sponsored UPT, unlinked passenger trips, which are only collected by the demand response mode types. VRM and VRH stand for vehicle revenue miles and vehicle revenue hours. VOMS is vehicles operated in maximum service and should be thought of how many vehicles you had on the road at your busiest time of the year for this mode. UPT are your unlinked passenger trips, and SUPT are sponsored UPT. Again, these are common abbreviations, and I will be referring to them as such throughout the presentation. We will first cover vehicle revenue miles, or VRM, and vehicle revenue hours, or VRH. Revenue service is when vehicles are transporting passengers and are able to transport transport passengers. This includes layover and recovery time. Revenue service does not include deadhead, driver training, school bus or charter services, and vehicle maintenance. The main point is you need to have the expectation of carrying passengers, but what is deadhead and why isn't it reported? So deadhead is when there is no expectation of carrying passengers. This includes leaving or returning to the garage or yard facility or changing routes. There are detailed tables found within the NTD policy manual which provide further examples of what is and is not considered revenue service. We will review these tables in a few slides. Some transportation services, such as meal delivery services or other non-passenger services, are not reportable to the NTD as they do not meet FTA's definition of public transportation. Please omit the operating expenses and service data for these services from your NTD report. If 5311 funding is used for these projects, please report the funds that were spent in the funding line, but omit them from the line operating expenses by mode and type of service. Some transportation services, such as meal delivery services or other here is a table for the demand response mode of what is and is not considered revenue service. Please note that the time and miles from when the vehicle is dispatched from the garage to pick up a passenger are not considered revenue service until they reach the pickup point. On the other end of that example, the time and miles from the last drop-off back to the dispatching point are also not considered revenue service. So following up on the previous slide, this is a rundown on what is and is not considered revenue service for the bus mode. Again, from the garage to the first stop of the route is not considered revenue service, and from the last drop-off point back to the garage is not considered revenue service. Both of these tables are found in the policy manual and may be helpful to review if you have questions as to what to report for revenue service. Sponsored trips are trips that are paid for in part or in full by a third party. These may be part of a coordinated human services transportation plan. So common sponsors are the VA, Medicaid, and assisted living centers. Sponsored UPT should be reported as a subset of the total unlinked passenger trips for all demand response modes and should be counted in each time a passenger boards the vehicle. Vehicles operated in annual maximum service, or VOMS, are the number of revenue vehicles an agency operates to meet the annual maximum service requirement. VOMS are counted during the peak season of the year on the busiest day. This count should include any volunteer vehicles that were used in maximum service. This shouldn't be the number of active vehicles your agency has in service, but rather how many vehicles are used at once during peak service. Again, we are looking for a snapshot of one point during the day, not the entire fleet of vehicles used over the course of a day. So we're done with the service data definitions. Now we're going to talk about the financial requirements. NTD reporting requirements for financial data follow generally accepted accounting principles and accrual accounting. In accrual accounting, the revenue is recorded when earned, regardless of when payment is received, and expenses are recorded when the liability occurs, regardless of when the payment is made. Please see the examples here and in the policy manual for more detail. Next, we will review types of expenses. So first up is operating expenses. Operating expenses are the day-to-day expenses that a transit agency incurs. These may be for operating and maintaining vehicles, maintaining other equipment, planning costs, admin costs, as well as the other examples seen here. Capital assistance spent on operations is when capital funding is spent on activities that are normally considered operating, such as preventative maintenance and the purchase of tires. Please make sure to break this out of your other operating funding line items, as this has a different match percentage. There is a separate field for this on the RR20 form for certain funding sources, such as 5311 or 5310. Capital expenses are those related to the purchase of equipment. Equipment means an article of non-expendable personal property that having a useful life of more than 1 year. The equipment will have an acquisition cost which equals the lesser of the capitalization level established by the government unit for financial statement purposes, or $5,000 as determined by FTA. Again, you may have a lower limit than the established limit, and that is perfectly acceptable. The next financial item I'd like to cover is what to do when your agency reports multiple modes and you need to allocate expenses for shared costs. In the case your agency has more than 2 modes, the operating costs will be broken out between the modes based on the direct and shared expenses. Once the direct expenses for each mode are identified and broken out, the remaining shared expenses may be calculated between the modes based on an allocation method. Please note that it is only acceptable for shared expenses. There should be some expenses that are direct to each mode, such as fuel, wages, or marketing materials. Please note that you should be reporting what you have spent, not what you have been awarded. In this example, the agency receives $275,000, but only spent $178,000 of that. They would report the $178,000 in their report. So switching gears slightly, we will mention capital responsibility multiple times throughout this presentation with regards to transit asset management plans. Please see the list here to determine whether or not an agency has direct capital responsibility for an asset. As a note for the third bullet point, an infrastructure asset itemized as a capital line item in the budget does not necessarily mean an agency has direct capital responsibility. An agency must also have management or oversight responsibilities for the line item project. In addition, performing minimal preventative maintenance work doesn't necessarily indicate direct capital responsibility. So this concludes the section, and now we've completed a high-level review of definitions and acronyms of NTD reporting. And next we will review the NTD interface and account user management. The NTD homepage is found at www.transit.dot.gov/NTD. This is where data products, policy manuals, and a clickable link to go to the reporting system are housed. So logging in using login.gov, you will click on the blue link that reads, "If you are a non-FTA user, click this link to log in." From there, it will prompt you to log in to login.gov. Please make sure to set this up with the same email address you use for NTD reporting. In addition to an email and password, login.gov will require the use of at least one secondary authentication method, such as a code delivered through a text message or phone call. Once set up, whichever method was chosen will be used when logging into the NTD reporting system. After logging in, all users land on the homepage, the Appian platform, which houses NTD, trams, and faces. Here you will select NTD in order to access your report. If you would like to automatically go into the NTD site every time you log in, you can click the star at the top right of the NTD box, and this will save your preference. The NTD homepage allows you to directly access your NTD report from the homepage by selecting either the folder icon or the pencil icon. Next is the Tasks tab. This section will house any tasks that are assigned directly to you. To access your report packages, you will want to ensure that you are on the home page. From here, you will select the Annual tab, and it will populate any open NTD reports for your agency. You can access the forms one of two ways. You can either click on the NTD ID with the folder icon on the left, which will direct you to the report package summary page. This route will also allow you to access related actions for the package. If you would like to edit the forms, you can click on the pencil icon on the right side of the page, and the system will take you directly to the clickable list of forms to edit. Another way to review your subrecipients is going to your state package and then clicking on subrecipient packages. So to access the reporter profiles, you will still want to ensure you are on the home page or tab. You will select profile, and your agency profile will load after clicking on your agency. The profile is where you will edit your mode, agency basic information, as well as view other users from your agency. To view the individual forms, you will click on the pencil icon on the right side of the page, which will allow you to access the P10, P20, and other profile forms. To access other profile options, click on the NTD ID folder icon on the left. Please note that you may see agencies that you no longer report on behalf of. This is stores that you may go back to the review past submissions as needed. So once you click on the NTD ID folder icon on the left, you will see the profile summary page. Here you can go through related actions to edit the P forms. The form library is where you can see data from previous years that has been submitted to the NTD. You will use the drop down to select the package, then the link in blue for whichever form you want. These will be downloaded in HTML format. In addition to viewing the forms under the Related Actions tab of the profile, you will be able to print previous year report packages in full rather than by form. Other actions you can complete are viewing and editing the profile forms, the P10 or basic information form, the P20 or the mode form, the P30 to review the users for your agency, and the P50 form for GTFS data if your agency operates a fixed route mode. If you select the print button to download the selected annual report package, you will be taken to a new page where you will see the refresh button. Please wait a few minutes and click on the refresh button. When the page reloads after you select refresh, the downloadable link file will appear under your reporter name. Each agency must have at least one user manager. This person will be able to add, remove, and edit users within your agency. For further information, please see the link here or contact your analyst. Here are the user roles within the NTD reporting system. Please note there can only be one CEO and one NTD contact. There must be a CEO in order to submit the report. Otherwise, the CEO delegate can do all the same actions as the CEO, and the NTD contact can submit the packages after the original submission. If you are already a user in the system and need to unlock your account, there are two different ways to complete this. You can either unlock your own account if you have set up security questions, which we'll go over in the next slide, or you can submit an unlock request. If you submit an unlock request, the request will go to your agency's user managers. It's important to note that even if you are locked out, you can still log into the NTD system. However, report forms will be unavailable until you are unlocked using either of the two options. So as mentioned, if you have set up your security questions beforehand, you'll be able to unlock your own account. And to set up your questions, first go to the top right-hand corner of your screen and select Profile. Click on Related Actions and then Manage Security Questions. From there, the system will provide steps to create the security questions. And next, we're going to go over the Report Year Kickoff to start the year off. The Report Year Kickoff will appear as a task in the list of NTD contacts, CEO delegates, and CEOs. You will need to click on the task, click Accept, and then Proceed. This will assign it to you. You will next verify the users on the P30 form. If any users need to be updated, you can complete the kickoff. Then as user manager, make those updates. If you need additional user managers added, please contact your analyst. Next, in your review, you will review your agency's current modes. These are pre-populated from the prior year. Please do not enter an end date to your mode unless the mode has been ended, as if you add an end date, that cannot be changed. The next step is where you will advise who your sponsor is for your TAM plan. If you had one in the prior year, it will pre-populate as seen here, and then you will click continue. If you need to select a sponsor, you'll search for your sponsor by name or NTD ID and add them. If you do not have one and you complete your own TAM plan, you'll click on continue and leave that area blank. Next, you'll confirm your agency's emergency contact. If it is correct, you'll click continue. Otherwise, you can update from this form or complete the kickoff and update that person's information on the P10 located in your agency's profile forms. Next, you're going to confirm the reporter type for the current report year. As noted here, all NTD tribes are small system reporters, and you'll confirm that no is selected. After confirming the current year selection, you'll be routed to a page for the next report year. Again, you'll confirm that no is selected and then click on submit. So once you click on submit, you'll see this box populate stating that the kickoff has been complete, and then it may take a couple of minutes to populate your forms. They may take longer to populate based on how large your agency is. If you click on OK, then go back to your home page. If you have any issues with kickoff, please contact your analyst. Once the kickoff is completed, it's time to enter data on the forms. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Reed to go over completing the annual report, submission, and validation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lee. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Reed Kottman, and I will be taking us through how to complete the NTD report for 2025. So to access your report, you can first navigate to the NTD homepage and ensure that the annual tab is open. Then you can select your agency's report package from this list. It should be for the fiscal year 2025. From the report package summary view, select the Annual Forms button in the top right-hand corner to open the editable list of forms. Once the list of forms is open, you can select the hyperlinked form name to begin reporting. So these are the forms that will appear in your 2025 annual NTD report. So please note that some of these forms may vary for some of you depending on the modes and types of service you report to the NTD. We're going to walk through the basic forms together in this section. All right, so the first form we will review is the basic information B10 form. Now, if you've completed an annual NTD report last year, the information on the B10 form should pre-populate, so it should already be there. But if your agency is reporting to the NTD voluntarily, please select the new yes for the Are You a Voluntary Reporter data field. Again, that's new for this year, so you will have to enter something there. Now, as a reminder, if you do benefit from FTA 5311 or 5307 funds, you are not a voluntary reporter and you should select no for that field. The demographic information section of the B10 form is also pre-populated from the prior year's report. Please review the information to confirm that the data is correct. If there have been any changes to the areas your agency serves, such as serving a new state or an urban area, you may proceed with updating the data in the applicable section here. So again, your data should already appear from last year in this section, the tribal demographics section, of course, if applicable for your agency's reporter type, which is for the tribes. Please review the data to ensure that it is up to date. Now, the auxiliary section should only be completed if another agency reports your assets or service data is not included in your own report. The auxiliary sections are typically rare, so if you haven't reported this section in the past, please do not complete the section without discussing it first with your NTD analyst. Once you've reviewed the entire form, you may proceed with selecting Save and Validate on the bottom right-hand corner of the form to finalize everything. Next, we'll discuss the Geographic Area Coverage B15 form. So starting back in report year 2023, agencies with demand response modes began completing this form, which contains 10 questions about their geographic service area coverage. Agencies must complete one B15 form for each demand response mode and type of service combination they report. If you completed the B15 form last year, your responses will already pre-populate into this year's form. But you should still review your responses and ensure that they are up to date for this year. If you started a new demand response mode as of report year 2025, you must complete a new B15 form once you add the mode to your report. So we're going to go over each of the 10 questions presented in this report form. Some of these questions are dynamic based on your selections to the prior questions, so bear with me here. Question 1 asks if you serve residents in another state besides your own state. Select yes or no for that one. And then question 2 allows you to select the counties that your agency serves, either in whole or in part, which is where you pick up residents for a new trip origin. You should start by selecting Add if you do need to add anything to this question, which you can choose your state and report the associated counties. Question 3 allows you to select the census places that are served within each of those selected counties. You can then report the service level in each census place by selecting wholly served or partially served. Now, please note that you can also download the counties and census places reference file directly from the reporting system if you need to, if you just need to know what CDPs are within the counties that you reported. So that report is an Excel file that populates based on the counties you entered in question 2 and will contain all of the corresponding census places so that you can complete question 3. But again, that file is optional. Question 4 asks if any portion of your demand response service is intended to meet the Americans with Disabilities Act or ADA complementary paratransit requirements for a fixed route mode. Select yes or no for that one, and please note that you should only select yes if your service provides ADA paratransit for a specific fixed route system. Now, the question does not refer to whether your service is just generally ADA compliant. You can select yes for that, and if you do select yes for question number 4, question number 5 asks if your service area is limited to your own NTD ID. Now, if it is, you can select yes, but if the ADA service serves other NTD reporters, select no. And if you select no, you should search for and select all other NTD IDs or reporter names that your service covers. Question 6 asks if you have different passenger eligibility requirements or different terms and conditions of service. Select yes or no. And then question 7 asks which days per week you operate, for which you should select all applicable checkboxes. When you're done selecting your days, select the Create Days of the Week box on the right-hand side of the page. This will populate your selected days into question number 8. And for question number 8, you should first report the service begin and end time for each of your selected days. You will also answer basic questions about these services as seen in the column headers under question 8 shown in this screenshot. If you have any questions about these specific items, please contact your NTD validation analyst or use the tooltips, which are those blue question marks next to each column header. Question number 9 asks for the minimum advance reservation time for your service. Enter the numeric minimum and then indicate whether that number corresponds to days or hours. Now, as a reminder, if you require passengers to reserve their trip by a certain time the day before, report 1 day for this question rather than 24 hours. Additionally, if different services within the demand response mode have different advanced reservation requirements, you should report the shortest minimum advanced reservation time required. And finally, question 10 asks for the fare charge for this service. You should not include donations in this field, just the fares. All right, now we will discuss the B30 contractual relationship form. The B30 form captures data related to contracts with other transit agencies. This contracted service is considered purchased transportation and must meet the following three criteria. The buyer must pay the full cost of the service must operate under the name of the buyer, and the seller must manage and operate the service. To add a new contractual relationship, select the Add New Contract button on the top right of your NTD page. Next, select the type of agency that you have a contract with. Please note, if you select NTD Reporter, you will be asked to select the agency from a list that will be generated after making that selection. Once the Continue button is selected, you will be presented with this page. On the left, you will need to complete the contract summary section, which provides basic information about the agreement. Please contact your analyst if you have questions about completing this section. When the when the contract summary section is completed, you may proceed with selecting the Add New Mode/Type of Service button in the Key Financial Operational Statistics section. Once selected, you can enter the mode and type of service used in the agreement. Now for the tribal agencies or the tribe, oh, pardon, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Once the mode has been added, you can enter the key financial operations data on the bottom right of the form. Once completed, select that Save and Validate button on the bottom right-hand corner and close to exit the form. Now, if you have a contract that is pre-populated from the prior year and is no longer, you may use the Remove Contractual Relationship button to remove the agreement from your report. So for tribal reporters, the B30 forms also capture subsidy agreements if applicable. So subsidy agreements apply if your agency contributes an annual subsidy to a local transit agency without covering that whole cost of service. So for example, if you provide an agency with a fixed amount annually to extend their service into your agency's area, this would be considered a subsidy agreement. A subsidy agreement will be captured on the B30 form similarly to a purchase transportation agreement with the mode and type of service reported. All right, next we'll discuss the Transit Asset Management Facilities Inventory A15 form. So as a reminder, in 2025, all facilities should be reported regardless of your agency's capital responsibility. When adding a new facility to the A15 form, you can select the Add New box. Any facilities that have been reported in prior years will automatically pre-populate onto this form. Now, however, with the new data fields added to the form this year to replace that old A10 form, additional data will need to be entered for some of the existing facilities. If the Add New box is selected, the system will prompt you to enter the facility's information. Select Add Facility to begin entering the data for the new facility. Depending on the type of facility entered, different data fields will appear underneath. So for example, if a passenger station facility type is selected, the next section will populate with the corresponding data fields for that facility type. After selecting a passenger station facility type and completing that first section, which includes the facility name and primary mode, the second section containing ADA accessibility information and condition assessment can be completed. Please note that moving sidewalks in addition to escalators and elevators that are not used for passengers should not be included. If a maintenance facility type is selected, the second section will include the data that was previously collected on the A10 form. Rather than that old grid that had previously been included on the A10 form, this section uses a drop-down menu to select the maintenance facility type. So general maintenance facilities with less than 200 vehicles, between 200 and 300 vehicles, greater than 300 vehicles, and heavy maintenance facilities. This section also includes right of use, owned or leased by, and leased from data fields as applicable. For facilities with different types, such as a vehicle washing facility, The second section will only require a condition assessment to be reported. As a reminder, condition assessments should be completed every 4 years per the TAM cycle. Facilities are rated on a scale of 1 to 5 based on FTA's term scale. Please note that the estimated date of condition assessment cannot be after the current report year's fiscal year end. For facilities that are pre-populated on the A15 form from prior years, the data for the primary mode and type of service data field will need to be updated. If your agency is reporting existing facilities that are either maintenance facilities or passenger stations, they will require the additional data to be entered that we just went over for those new facility types. If any of the reported facilities have missing required data, an error message will appear at the top of the form as seen here on the slide. If your agency has no facilities to report on this form, please select the No Data to Report checkbox prior to saving and validating. Next, we will review the Revenue Vehicle Inventory A30 form. If you completed this form last year, your data from report year 2024 will pre-populate, which means you will only need to add new fleets or edit existing fleets as needed. You can enter new fleets by selecting the Add New Fleet button, or you can edit an existing fleet by selecting the RVI ID link for that fleet towards the left of the table. When adding a new fleet, the first section you will see is basic information. You should complete all required fields for this section. Some examples of the fields in this section include vehicle type, total vehicles, ownership type, and funding type. The next section is vehicle information. Again, complete all required fields in this section, including fuel type. Please note that the mileage section, however, is located just below the vehicle information section, only applies for small system reporters. Tribes will not have the mileage information section on their A30 forms, so they can disregard that. Transit agencies must report the number of active vehicles in each fleet at the end of the fiscal year. Total vehicles represent how many vehicles there are in the fleet you are reporting. Active vehicles indicates the number of vehicles that provide regular service and include spare vehicles, whereas inactive vehicles may include any of the following: vehicles that are awaiting sale or disposal, vehicles that are in storage or in part of an FTA-approved emergency contingency plan, or vehicles that are out for major repairs. As a quick reporting reminder, please remember to mark fleets as retired in the reporting system if the vehicles have been sold or disposed of rather than going and deleting the fleets. To retire a fleet, update the number of active vehicles to 0, after which you should see an automated prompt asking, "Is this fleet retired?" for which you should select yes. You should only delete fleets if they were added to the form in error or if you are removing a duplicate after using the Add Existing Fleet function. When in doubt, contact your analyst. All right, the next form is the Service Vehicle Inventory A35 form. Agencies must report service vehicle fleets for which they have capital responsibility. Service vehicles include cars used for administrative staff, transit police cars, and tow trucks. Because service vehicles must be roadworthy in order to be reported, agencies should not report small forklifts, golf carts, or any type of construction equipment that is not considered roadworthy. This form works in a similar manner as the A30 form. To create a fleet, select the Add New button. Please ensure that you report revenue vehicles on the A30 form and service vehicles on the A35 form. In other words, you should not report vehicles on the A35 form if those vehicles are used to transport passengers. If the Add New box is selected, select the vehicle type from the drop-down menu below, which consists of 3 options: automobiles, trucks and other rubber-tired vehicles, and steel wheel vehicles. Automobiles are passenger cars up to and including station wagons in size. If you have a service vehicle that is a minivan or anything larger, report them as trucks and other rubber tire vehicles. Now, estimated cost is the most recent estimate of the full cost to replace the fleet that is reported. If you do not have a recent estimate, you may report the original cost of the fleet or its insured value. You must also report the year that corresponds to the dollar value that you report. Once complete, you can save and validate the A35 form. If you do not have any reportable service vehicles, you can just select the No Data to Report checkbox prior to saving and validating the form. Next, we will review the Transit Asset Management Performance Measure Targets A90 form. The A90 form captures the number of your agency's assets that have reached or exceeded their useful life. The form compares the data reported on the asset forms to your current year targets for the state of the assets reported. If your agency participates in a Transit Asset Management or TAM group plan, the group plan sponsor will complete the A90 form on your behalf. The first section of the A90 form, rolling stock, is for the revenue vehicles you reported on your A30 form. For asset types that you report on the A30 form, you will report the percentage of the total that you expect to meet or exceed their useful life in fiscal year 2026. So make a special note there, fiscal year 2026, not 2025. It's looking forward a year. For asset types that you are not reporting, please select the NA checkbox on the far right. The second section is for the service vehicles reported on the A35. And the third section is for the facilities reported on the A15 form. If a facility has a condition assessment below a 3 on the FTA term scale, it would be considered to have reached or exceeded their useful life. So the final portion of the A90 form is the narrative report. The narrative report is required for agencies with their own TAM plan and should include a narrative that describes the state of different asset types and includes any changes that may affect the progress towards the condition targets reported on that A90 form. Please upload the narrative report to the bottom left of the A90 form and select Save and Validate when complete. All right. Next, we'll go over the Reduced Reporting RR20 form, which contains your agency's financial, service, and resource data. When you open the RR20 form, the first two sections are total funds expended and funds expended by mode. The funds expended section allows you to manually input your operating and capital expenses for each mode that you operate. Now, in this example, the agency operates two modes: demand response, directly operated, and bus, directly operated. The agency reported an annual total of $325,000 in operating expenses and $250,000 in capital expenses, and reported the corresponding annual totals for each mode in their respective fields. Now, please note that these totals are rounded for example purposes only. You should report all the funds that your agency expended towards public transit service. Do not limit your expenses to just federal grant programs. In the subsequent sections of the RR20 form, you will identify the various sources of funds that supported your transit system. We will cover different funding source categories in the next few slides, so as you begin to report your funding sources, the system will automatically calculate a running total in the total funds expended section. In this example, the agency has reported all of its funding sources, federal and otherwise, which totaled to $325,000 in operations and $250,000 in capital. The sum of your funding sources typically matches what you entered in the funds expended section, as shown in this screenshot here. The operating expenses match as shown by the totals in red, and the capital expenses match as shown by the totals in green. Agencies that operate more than one mode are required to capture and report actual expenses by mode and type of service. If you have more than one mode, you should determine which expenses are direct expenses and can be easily traced to a specific mode. Direct costs may include driver's wages or vehicle repairs for specific modes. For the remaining joint or shared expenses, which are costs that are incurred for the benefit of more than one mode and cannot be directly traced, you may allocate those remaining costs. An example of shared costs may be a transit manager's salary that supports both the demand response and a fixed route service. You may allocate shared costs using a reasonable method like an allocation factor, such as vehicle revenue miles, unlinked passenger trips, vehicle revenue hours, or number of employees per mode. The next section of the RR20, which begins the different funding source categories, is fare revenues. Fare revenues includes all income received and expended directly from passengers, which includes donations made on board a transit vehicle. This section is broken down between passenger paid fares and organization paid fares. It is also broken down by mode and type of service. If your agency reports two or more modes or types of service, passenger paid fares are those that are, pardon, passenger paid fares are those that are traditionally considered as passenger fares, in which a rider pays to board the vehicle. This category includes full adult fares, senior citizen fares, student fares, child fares, and fares for individuals with disabilities. This section also includes donations that are made on board the vehicle in lieu of paying a fare. Now, organization paid fares are those that an organization pays for or pays through a third party rather than the passenger themselves. One common example of an organization paid fare is a university paying a transit agency to allow students to ride fare-free. Funds expended from Medicaid or non-emergency medical transportation or NEMT should be reported as organization paid fares. If your agency operates more than one mode, you must capture and report the fares by mode and type of service. There are some exceptions to this requirement as listed here, and if your agency's fare policy meets either of these criteria, please notify your NTD analyst during validation if needed. In most cases, for reduced reporters and tribes, fare revenues can be tracked for each mode and therefore should be reported as actual data and not allocated. The next section source, pardon, the next funding source in the form is other directly generated funds, which are funds other than fares that your agency directly generates. Some common examples of other directly generated funds are advertising revenues, concession revenues, fundraisers, park and ride revenues, interest on investments, contract revenue for any non-full cost contracts, and donations and insurance recoveries. Now, when I say donations for this field, this refers to lump sum donations that are made that come from local charity foundations, fundraising events, or private individual donors. This does not refer to donations made on board the vehicle, which are passenger paid fares. If you report funds of this field, a required text box will appear where you can explain the sources of the reported funds. Revenues accrued through a purchase transportation or PT agreement should only be reported if your agency receives revenues from another agency who pays the full cost of a transit service that you provide. Now, as long as it meets the NTD definition of purchase transportation, you can report it here. If you have not historically reported funds to this field, please discuss with your NTD analyst if you think this field applies to your service. The next funding source category is non-federal funds. Please enter the data based on your funds that your agency expended from local, state, and other non-federal sources. Local sources include tax levies, general funds, and finances from local entities. Again, a text description box will appear for this section, so please ensure that you enter a description of the funds reported in the other field if there are any. In the federal funds section, select all applicable federal funding sources from the list of programs. Once you select a box, the corresponding data entry fields will populate to the right. If you report funds to any other category in this section, such as other federal funds or other FTA funds, you'll be required to provide a text description to describe that funding program. In the cases where it requires that text description, please make sure that you're adding detail as to where those funds are actually coming from. Examples of other FTA funds includes those that are not already listed on the RR20 form, such as Section 5308, FTA Clean Fuels Program. Other US DOT funds will include funds that come from the Department of Transportation that are not from FTA, such as funds from Federal Highway Administration. Examples of other federal funds includes from funds from a non-FTA or non-DOT federal grant not already listed on the form. So this could be housing and urban development or HUD funds or BIA funds. The last section of the RR20 form is the annual service data section. This is where you will report the service data for each mode you report. Please be sure to only include revenue service data for the reported vehicle revenue hours and revenue miles reported in this section. Additionally, for demand response modes, the sponsored UPT should be included in the total unlinked passenger trips, or UPT. For agencies that are just reporting a subsidy agreement, they will have a shortened version of the RR20 form where they will report the subsidy total and its funding sources. These reporters will not report the provider's full cost of service, just the subsidy amount. All right, next we're going to discuss the Safety and Security SNS 60 form. The bipartisan infrastructure law requires NTD to collect data related to assaults on transit workers. Agencies who report to the NTD must report all assaults on transit workers, even if the assault does not result in an injury. Here is a refresher on the two assault type categories, physical and non-physical. Physical assaults involve physical contact with the transit worker and can include any contact with the attacker's body, a weapon, a projectile, or another item. Physical assaults can also include the assailant's saliva. Now, non-physical assaults do not involve any sort of physical contact and can include threats or intimidation that interferes with the transit worker's duties. Reportable events can occur at one of the following locations: transit infrastructure, transit revenue or maintenance facilities, during transit-related maintenance activities, or involving a transit vehicle as long as it meets a reporting threshold. The SNS 60 form requires reporters to provide additional data for bus collision fatalities. Towards the bottom of the SNS 60 form, you will find fields for collisions with pedestrians, collisions with vehicles, and collisions with other. The physical and non-physical assaults I mentioned a few slides ago are reported in these two sections at the top of the SNS 60 form. Please note that the columns represent different areas where the assault could have occurred. You may refer to the safety section of the 2025 Reduced Reporting Policy Manual for additional information on safety reporting thresholds. The third and final section of the SNS 60 form is the All Other Reportable Safety and Security Data section. The first three rows refer to the following collision types: collisions with pedestrians, collisions with vehicles, and collisions with other, which can include things like an animal, a manhole, or a shopping cart. Please note that you should only report safety events to these categories if they meet a major event reporting threshold, which are outlined in the NTD Policy Manual for reduced reporters. If you have any reportable collisions that meet the criteria, you should report an annual count under the major events column. You should then report any corresponding fatalities or injuries resulting from the collision, if any are applicable. All right, moving on, we'll go over the Federal Funding Allocation FFA 10 form. So just as a heads up, this form will be locked until the RR20 and B10 forms have both been saved and validated. The FFA10 form pulls data from the RR20 and B10 forms to allow you to allocate your data between the areas you serve, such as multiple states or urban areas. It changes to these, If changes to these forms have been made after the initial save, you may use the Recalculate button on the FFA10 form to pull in the most up-to-date data from the RR20 and B10 forms. In the top of the form, you will be asked to select an allocation method from the UZA reporting method drop-down menu. These include actual data, actual VRM, and other. Please note that this selection should be consistent with what you've selected in prior years unless there's been some sort of change, in which case your analyst will ask about this in validation. Once the allocation method has been selected, you will allocate the data in the grid below. In this example included in the slide, the agency serves only one UZA, which is 14, and they have selected actual VRM as their allocation method. So they will type their full VRM, which is 68,900, under the UZA column on the VRM row. After typing in the value, please ensure that the percentage column on the far right reads 100% to ensure that all of the data has been allocated correctly. And now we'll review the final form, the CEO certification D10. The first page of the D10 form will require confirmation of the overall accuracy and conformance of the data included in the report. Select yes if the financial, service, and asset data are accurate and conform to NTD and USOA requirements. Once finished, select the unlinked passenger trip data blue link to continue. In the unlinked passenger trip section, select the method used to collect the unlinked passenger trip data. Additionally, please note that the used APC data checkbox should only be selected if your agency uses an automated passenger counter. Otherwise, please leave that unchecked. Once complete, select the general feed specification link if your agency operates a fixed route mode. If your agency does not operate a fixed route mode, you may disregard the section. In the GTFS section, you will be asked to confirm the current GTFS feed for your fixed route mode is up to date. If the link is not up to date, you may proceed with updating it on the P50 form, which is linked here on that D10 form. All right, so that's it for the report forms. We will now move on to report validation and submission. So analysts will send reports back with open issues if they have follow-up questions regarding the reported data. Validation includes, but is not limited to, time series checks against your agency's historical data, logic checks between data items on different forms, and checks for values that fall outside the typical industry range. To resolve validation issues, you can either revise the data to reflect accurate information or provide a text explanation that addresses the issue to establish accuracy. Please avoid providing generalized responses such as the data is correct, since these types of responses do not offer a clear explanation for why the data actually changed. The more information or context that you can provide early in the reporting process will help you reduce the number of report turnovers before the reports close out. Once the analyst has reviewed the report, they will return it to you with open validation issues if there are any data concerns. As the report revision count increases, the revision time period decreases, as the report should have fewer and fewer issues with each submission. Be sure to address any items that were cited in last year's closeout letter. So if you fail to correct any of those issues that were stated in that 2024 closeout letter, the data may be marked as questionable in report year 2025. To recap, each report form has a regular save button as well as a save and validate button. If you save and validate a form, the form will appear as green on the summary table. However, if you make changes to the form afterwards, you must select that Save and Validate button again. If you make changes to a form that has already been saved and validated and hit the normal Save button, The form will revert back to red and will not turn green until you save and validate the form again. To view issues on a specific form, you can enter the form and select the View Issues button on the bottom right-hand corner. Alternatively, you can return to the report summary page or the Related Actions tab and select the View Issues link. This option will allow you to see all of the open issues across the whole report. Once View Issues has been selected, you'll be presented with a list of issues. To view a specific issue, please click on it, which will highlight it a darker blue, and scroll down. Once you've scrolled down, you will be presented with the full issue information and a comment box. If the issue can be resolved by an appropriate explanation, you may type your comment in the box and select Save on the bottom right. If the issue requires a data revision, you can select the View Related Form button to go directly to the affected form where you can revise the data if needed. When addressing open issues on the report, please ensure to carefully read the issue description prior to commenting. If the issue requires an explanation, please provide a detailed comment that gives the analyst a clear picture of the service change that led to the issue. Please do not enter comments such as data is correct if you can, and if you are unsure of how to explain an issue or address an issue, please refrain from commenting and contact your analyst directly for assistance with clarifying the issue. Reports may be considered incomplete if there are outstanding issues such as nonconformance to NTD guidelines, failure to respond to validation, copy and pasting comments that do not explain a validation issue, or resubmitting a report without saving data changes. If issues like this are left outstanding, FTA will cite them in the closeout letter. To submit to submit the annual report, please first ensure that all forms have been saved and validated and are green, and that no open issues remain. Once confirmed, the CEO or CEO delegate user can proceed with submitting the report by first selecting Related Actions and then Submit Annual Report Package. Any subsequent revisions can also be submitted by the NTD contact role. If all forms have been saved and validated and no open validation issues remain, you will see a Continue button to confirm the submission of the annual report. Now, if there are open issues or unvalidated forms, the system will provide a list of the issues or forms that will need to be addressed prior to the report submission. In summary, this is a timeline of the NTD report validation process. As always, please contact your analyst if you have any questions. So looking forward to report year 2025, you will receive a welcome letter from your assigned NTD analyst when your report forms become available in the system. The welcome letter will contain links to many helpful resources to assist with the report, as well as a checklist which will assist in guiding you through completing everything. If you encounter any issues while completing your report, of course, again, as always, you can contact your analyst for assistance with validation and report submission. That's what us NTD analysts are here for, so please feel free to contact us as needed. All right, so that concludes our presentation for this afternoon. Here's the contact information for our whole NTD team, as well as the help desk, which is open, as Lee mentioned, Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you to everyone for joining us this afternoon, and please pardon the technical difficulties. I will now turn it back over to Lori to close us out.